It started with pasta. Pasta is never innocent. People think it's humble, flour, egg, a little heat. But it has a way of exposing everything. That night, I made my lemon basil fettuccine with roasted garlic shrimp. I'd made it dozens of times before. It's not just dinner, it's comfort, therapy, edible silk. But that night, he took 2 bites, set his fork down, and said, "Did you forget the salt again?" I blinked. There's sea salt and Parmesan, which is salty. He didn't look up. You just don't taste things like I do. I wanted to say, actually, my entire palate exists just fine without your commentary. But instead, I just nodded and offered him more bread. That was how it began. Small critiques. Every meal, every time. The spaghetti was too wet, the lasagna too dry, the curry too bold. Who even says that? He started bringing home takeout more often, conveniently just before dinner time. Pad thai, tacos, chicken and rice in bland beige containers. Once I made chicken pot pie, his childhood favorite, and he said, "I think my mom's was thicker and less green. It had herbs. It was still hot when I scraped it into the trash." Then came the night I wasn't prepared for. I'd worked late, got home flustered, and still threw together a simple 1-pot mushroom risotto. Creamy, cozy, good enough for any decent human being. He walked in, looked at the pot, and said, "Oh, you cooked?" I turned, spoon in hand. "Yeah. Is that a problem?" He set his briefcase down with a sigh. "I just think, maybe we should stop with all the experimental stuff. I'd prefer if you didn't cook for a while." I stared at him. I literally forgot to blink. "You don't want me to cook?" "Not until you get it, right?" As if cooking was a code I'd failed to crack. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're banning me from my own kitchen?" "I'm not banning. I'm suggesting." "It sounds a lot like banning," he shrugged. "It'll be easier for both of us." That night, I stared at my reflection in the microwave door, spoon still in my hand, wondering if I was going to cry or scream or just turn into soup myself. For a week, I didn't touch a pan. I heated his leftovers. I opened cereal. I chewed quietly while he ate on the couch, praising some stranger's chicken tikka from a styrofoam container. But inside, something simmered. And like any good broth, it got deeper with time. One night, he was out late. "Client dinner," he said. So I pulled out my Instant Pot, dusted it off like an old friend, and made sweet potato lentil stew. The smell alone made me feel like a real person again. And when I brought it to work the next day, that's when everything changed. I ate lunch at my desk as usual, but halfway through my first spoonful, my coworker Mel peeked over our shared cubicle wall. "Okay, what is that smell, and why is it making my stomach growl?" I offered her a bite. She took 1 spoonful and made a face like someone had just handed her a winning lottery ticket. "Girl," she said, "this tastes like a hug in a bowl." By the end of the hour, 3 more coworkers had wandered over for samples. I should have charged per spoon. They didn't just like it, they loved it. And it hit me. Maybe my food wasn't the problem. Maybe it just needed to land in the right mouths. I started bringing lunch more often, then entire containers to share. Spinach gnocchi with lemon zest and pine nuts. Ginger carrot soup with grilled cheese dippers. Mini tamarind glazed meatballs that made someone literally moan. The office fridge became my underground test kitchen. People started asking for recipes. Mel said, "If you had a food truck, I'd quit my job and work the register." At home, I still kept quiet. Still watched him order soggy sushi and reheated burgers. But every night, I slipped into bed a little more satisfied, knowing that somewhere my cooking was being devoured. And that was the beginning of the rebellion. A quiet one. Just me, a lunchbox, and a secret. It wasn't long before the office potluck appeared on my calendar like a gentle dare. Subject, winter warm-up feast, sign-up sheet attached. It was Mel who sent it, with a cheeky postscript just for me. "If you don't bring those meatballs, we riot." I laughed out loud at my desk, almost snorted tea out my nose. And just like that, I was in. But this wasn't going to be just bring something and hope they like it. No, this was my reintroduction. A quiet announcement. You didn't erase me. I spent the weekend testing recipes, adjusting the balance between spice and sweet. I wanted something with kick, with memory. Something that said, I've been through a lot, but I still know who I am. I landed on a dish my grandmother used to make for Lunar New Year. Caramelized chili soy chicken over coconut jasmine rice. Tender, sticky, fragrant. with a punch of red pepper that came in after the first smile. It wasn't flashy, but it lingered. The day of the potluck, I arrived carrying 2 large containers in a reusable bag that read, "I came, I stirred, I conquered." A gift from Mel, obviously. The conference room had already started filling up with store-bought cupcakes, 6 different lasagnas, and someone's sad vegetable tray. But when I opened my dish, the room tilted. You know that moment when a smell walks across the room before you do? That happened. Mel was the first to dig in, practically dragging people over. Forget your diets, this is worth every carb. Even the VP from the 3rd floor, who usually communicated only in spreadsheet jargon, took one bite and said, "Do you cater?" I nearly laughed. "No, just home cooking." He nodded slowly, chewing. "Well, maybe you should rethink that." That's when things escalated. A producer from a local morning show, Sunrise Today, was at the event. Apparently, her niece worked in our marketing department and had invited her for fun. She tried the chicken, then had another bite, then cornered me near the water cooler with the kind of smile that's both charming and slightly terrifying. "Would you ever consider sharing this recipe on TV?" I blinked. "On live television?" She waved a hand. "Very casual, very friendly. Just a segment called Dish of the Week. We feature local cooks, no pressure." My brain went full circus mode. Monkeys clanging cymbals, fireworks exploding, and one little voice screaming, "What if he sees it?" But another voice whispered something steadier. "What if you don't need his approval anymore?" I smiled. I'd be honored. I didn't tell my husband. I could have. I probably should have. But a part of me wanted to do it alone. Or maybe I just didn't want to see that look in his eyes again. The one that says, "You? Really?" Instead, I focused on the prep, retested the recipe, bought a new apron, practiced my talking points in front of the mirror while holding a spatula like a mic. I'm just a home cook, but food is how I love out loud, I'd say. Sweet, digestible, pun intended. The morning of the taping, I took a ride share to the station at 6:15 a.m. Fog clung to the windows. My fingers smelled like ginger and hope. The studio was smaller than I expected, warm and full of artificial sun. A makeup artist dabbed powder on my forehead while another person wired me up with a mic pack. Everything was moving so fast, and then someone said, "Your co-host this morning will be Marlene Hughes." I froze. That name, that voice, that was my mother-in-law. I turned slowly, and there she was. Hair perfectly curled, gold brooch shaped like a pear, smile sharper than a carving knife. She didn't recognize me at first. But then, "Wait, you're..." "Yup," I smiled. "It's me, today's featured cook." Her eyes flickered. Confusion, calculation, something else. But she didn't say a word. I held my spoon like it was a shield, and then the cameras rolled. The segment started with light banter. The host made a corny joke about spicing up our Tuesday. I nodded politely, then stepped into frame and lifted the lid off my dish. Steam rose in a dramatic little cloud. Marlene leaned in to sniff. She looked intrigued. "I'm making caramelized chili soy chicken," I said, "served over coconut jasmine rice. It's a twist on a family favorite." Marlene raised an eyebrow. "From your family?" "Mine," I nodded, "and maybe even a little from yours too." She chuckled, confused but amused. Then she took a bite. The pause that followed was pure TV gold. Her eyes widened. She set down her fork, then picked it back up for another bite. An unladylike bite, which for Marlene was practically a declaration of war. "This is incredible," she said. Then, with one perfect TV-ready smile, "Do you mind sharing the recipe?" I blinked. The host grinned. "Live on air? Let's go viral." I laughed softly and replied, "I think this recipe's been waiting for the right table all along." And as the camera panned to our faces, mine calm, hers stunned, I knew this moment was more than just a segment. It was a turning point, a reclaiming, and somewhere, maybe, a reckoning. When the cameras stopped rolling, the studio lights dimmed just slightly, and the whirlwind quieted to a hum. Marlene turned to me with a look I had never seen on her face before. Not disapproval, not forced politeness. It was curiosity, maybe even a dash of awe. She patted her lips with a napkin, slowly, as if trying to buy time while she processed everything. "I never knew you cooked like this," she said softly. I gave a small shrug, the kind you offer when you're not quite sure whether you're being complimented or studied under a microscope. "I guess I've just never had the right stage," I replied, half joking, half defensive. She stared at me for a moment longer, then nodded. "Well?" she said, brushing invisible crumbs from her lap. You found it. That afternoon, I thought the moment would disappear into the rest of the day. A funny little blip in Marlene's media schedule. A memory I could hold quietly without too much consequence. I was wrong, because by 2 p.m., the segment had been clipped and uploaded to the station's Instagram, then to Facebook. Then a cooking blog reposted it with the title, "Daughter-in-law silently shocks her husband's mother with epic dish." I didn't write that. I wasn't trying to make a statement. But the internet? Oh, the internet lives for statements. By the time I got home, my phone had nearly overheated. Texts, mentions, a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to since middle school that just read, "OMG, was that her?" Yes, it was her. And yes, that was me. I got home before my husband that day, which gave me a chance to rehearse the conversation I was dreading. Hey, funny story. No, I didn't tell you because I wanted it to be a surprise. Yes, that was your mom on TV next to me eating my banned cooking. Each version sounded more ridiculous than the last, so I did what any sensible woman would do. I made tea, took a deep breath, and decided to wing it. He walked in at 6:40, grocery bag in hand, frozen pizza. I swear the dramatic irony would have made Shakespeare roll in his grave. He dropped the bag on the counter, took one look at me, and said, "You okay?" I nodded. "Did you, see anything interesting online today?" He raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Oh, I don't know," I said, reaching for my mug. "Maybe a little cooking segment on Sunrise Today?" The pause was immediate, followed by a slow head tilt. Then, "Wait, you were on TV?" I took a sip of my tea, calm as a summer lake. And my mom was there? Yup. He blinked like he just walked into a parallel dimension. "And she ate your food?" "She asked for the recipe." He opened his mouth, then closed it, then tried again. "I don't understand." I set the mug down gently. "Well, that makes two of us. I didn't think my food was good enough to be eaten, let alone broadcast." His eyes narrowed. "Why didn't you tell me?" And there it was. The thing he was really mad about, not that I'd gone on TV, but that I hadn't told him. Because deep down, he wanted to control the narrative. Even now, even this. "I wanted it to be mine," I said simply. "Just once. Something that was mine from start to finish." He crossed his arms. "It just seems sneaky. And banning me from my own kitchen wasn't?" Silence. His jaw clenched, then released. He turned to the fridge and grabbed the orange juice, because conflict avoidance is best served cold and citrusy. We didn't speak much that evening, but I caught him scrolling on his phone, watching the video clip. And when Marlene smiled on screen and said, "Do you mind sharing the recipe?" His thumb paused, then locked the screen. The next day, I came home to something even stranger than a frozen pizza on the counter. A new set of cookware, still in the box, still with the receipt, and a little sticky note on top that read, "Maybe it's time I started listening." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. Over the next few days, the video kept making rounds. People messaged me asking for the full recipe. A local food blog interviewed me via Zoom and titled the piece, "How One Woman Took Back Her Kitchen with Coconut Rice." Mel made stickers, I'm not joking. Little round stickers with a cartoon version of me holding a spoon and the phrase, "She cooked anyway." I put one on my lunch container just to be petty and satisfying. Marlene called 3 days after the show. No, hello. Just, "I've been thinking about that chicken." I laughed. "It's addictive." "You didn't use fish sauce, did you?" "Just a touch." She sighed. I knew it. That's what gave it depth. We talked for 20 minutes about food, about the show, about how people online had called us the most wholesome culinary plot twist of the year. Before she hung up, she said, "You know, he never told me you could cook." I waited, then asked, "Would it have changed anything?" There was a pause. Then, "Maybe not, but I would have invited you to host Thanksgiving a lot sooner." Click, no goodbye, just like her. But I smiled anyway. Because I knew what that meant. The kitchen wasn't banned anymore, and neither was I. You'd think that would have been the climax. Me on TV, Marlene melting over a mouthful of chicken, the husband temporarily stunned into silence. But nope. Life, as it turns out, has excellent timing when it comes to irony and just enough leftover tension to cook a sequel. Because the next week, the segment went viral. Not like a few hundred likes viral. I mean hundreds of thousands of views. Someone turned the clip into a TikTok with lo-fi beats and subtitles like, "POV, Your husband says you can't cook, so his mom goes on national TV and proves him wrong. The comments were pure internet chaos. Sis served food and poetic justice. The real dish was revenge. Plot twist of the year, mother-in-law becomes hype woman. Someone else edited my calm smile into a girl boss rising montage, complete with flames and a zoom in when Marlene said, "Can I have the recipe?" That part? It looped endlessly. Can I have the recipe? Can I have the recipe? Can I have the recipe? Even I started hearing it in my dreams. It didn't stop there. Local bloggers began doing deep dives. I was suddenly the chicken girl from Sunrise Today. Someone found my old Pinterest board. Yes, the one with 87 saved crockpot recipes and 2 pins that said, "Don't let anyone dull your sparkle." I wasn't even mad. I mean, who was I before sparkle memes? And then an email came in. Subject, feature opportunity, homegrown flavor series. A digital magazine wanted to feature me as part of their spotlight on women rediscovering their voice through food. Their pitch line, "We believe kitchens are where revolutions often begin." I had to read that twice, because suddenly this wasn't just a fluke moment on daytime TV. It was becoming something bigger. At home, things were tepid. He wasn't exactly thrilled about the fame, especially since none of it included him. He made a few passive comments like, "Must be nice getting attention for dinner," and "Hope this phase doesn't distract you from real life." I wanted to scream, "This is real life!" Instead, I stirred my soup and turned up the volume on the Lo-Fi Girl playlist, because if she could study forever in that window, I could cook forever in mine. One evening, while I was testing a new twist on mapo tofu, he walked in and asked, "Do you want to talk?" I wiped my hands. Sure. He sat at the kitchen island, a spot he rarely occupied unless pizza delivery was involved. "I feel like I'm losing you," he said. I blinked. To what? Garlic local news? I don't know. To this version of you. He wasn't trying to be cruel, just honest, but it still stung. I didn't create a new version, I said quietly. I just stopped hiding the one that was already here. He was quiet for a long time. "You're different." "No," I said. "You're just finally seeing me." The magazine piece came out a week later. It featured soft photos of me in my little kitchen, steam rising from a pot of ginger broth, my hair tied up in a knot that was half intentional, half chaos. The title? Banned from her kitchen, she fed the city anyway. Mel cried. I cried. Marlene sent me a text that simply read, "Thanksgiving. Your house, you're in charge." And that's when I knew. Not only was the ban lifted, I had taken the kitchen back. Not just the physical space, but the symbolic one. The space to be heard, to create, to feed others with more than just food. I started teaching weekend classes, small, cozy things in a rented community center kitchen, home cooking for people who think they can't. We'd play music, talk about life, and chop ginger like it was therapy. The first class sold out in an hour, the second in 15 minutes. By the third, a local food collective offered me a permanent slot. And through it all, I cooked like I was writing a love letter to every version of myself who'd ever doubted she was enough. One night, months later, I came home from class and found a little note on the counter. My husband's handwriting. It read, "Tried to make your lentil stew. Failed miserably. Please help." Next to it, a pot, some chopped onions, and a very confused look on his face when I walked in. I didn't say anything. Just grabbed a spoon, adjusted the seasoning, and stirred gently. He watched. I handed him the spoon. He tasted and said, softly, "That's it." Not just the stew, the moment, the understanding, the shift. We weren't perfect, but something had softened. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to taste the difference. Thanksgiving came faster than expected. There's something about the promise of roasted things and stretchy pants that makes time speed up. And this year, it was my turn. My name was on the invite. The text thread was titled, "Turkey at Her Place, courtesy of Mel, of course." Even Marlene chimed in with, "Do you need help with anything? I can bring napkins or wine." Pause. Let that sink in. Marlene, offering to bring wine. Not to host, not to manage, not to critique. Just contribute. It felt like I had entered an alternate dimension. One where I cooked freely, my husband didn't flinch at the smell of cumin, and Marlene asked, not demanded. Still, I was nervous. Cooking for people is intimate. Cooking for family, after everything that happened, that's basically undressing your soul and asking everyone to rate it on a 10-point scale while they chew. But there was no turning back now. I started planning 2 weeks out. The spreadsheet had tabs. The shopping list had color coding. I had 3 types of stuffing: traditional, sourdough mushroom, and one bold sweet potato cornbread version that screamed, "Pinterest made me do it." Mel stopped by the night before and said, "Your kitchen looks like the Food Network and a tornado had a baby." I took that as a compliment. By sunrise on Thanksgiving morning, I was wrist-deep in pie dough, wearing socks that said "Stir Crazy." Hair in a messy knot, music softly playing in the background. Not lo-fi this time. Jazz. Smooth, brass-heavy, buttery jazz. My kind of quiet confidence. My own soundtrack. Guests began arriving around 3 p.m. Casseroles clutched like sacred offerings. Marlene brought wine, true to her word, plus 2 jars of her homemade cranberry chutney. She handed them to me with a wink. "It's got cinnamon and secrets," I grinned. "A woman after my own heart." My husband hovered, awkwardly helpful, as if trying to prove he was part of the story now instead of just an obstacle in the first few chapters. I didn't resent him for it. Growth is messy. He refilled water glasses. He set the table. He kept eyeing the roasted garlic turkey like it was going to whisper forgiveness. When dinner was served, silence fell. The good kind. The kind where forks clink and mouths are too full to talk. I watched them chew and nod, chew and smile, chew and, in Marlene's case, literally close her eyes mid-bite. Then she said it, loud enough for the table to hear. "You know, I think you might be the best cook in the family now." Forks paused midair. My husband actually choked on a green bean. Mel raised her glass like it was the toast of the year. I didn't gloat. I didn't blush. I just smiled. Calm, steady, inwardly screaming. Because that moment, that was everything I'd ever wanted. Not revenge. Not even validation, really. Just freedom. To stand in my kitchen. To cook what I loved. To be seen for who I was. Fully, messily, deliciously. After dinner, people lingered. There were second helpings, laughter, stories, even a surprise round of charades that involved someone dramatically acting out a burnt souffle, which rude but fair. Marlene helped dry dishes. Mel packed leftovers into labeled containers like a general organizing rations. And my husband? He stayed by my side. Not to supervise, not to critique, just present. At one point, I caught him taking a picture of the table. The candles, the crumbs, the empty pie plates. He looked up and said, "I don't know how you did this." I leaned against the counter. "I always could. You just didn't notice." He nodded. "I'm sorry." It wasn't dramatic. No music swelled in the background, but it felt real. Later that night, after everyone had left and the fridge looked like a game of Tetris played with Tupperware, I sat down with a slice of leftover pie and just exhaled. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just let the silence settle around me like a warm blanket. The same kitchen that once held tension like steam now felt soft, lived in, entirely mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt full. Not just from turkey and compliments, but from something deeper. Satisfaction. Belonging. A quiet victory baked at 375 degrees. And just before bed, I peeked at my phone. A message from Marlene. A photo of her cranberry chutney next to my stuffing. Captioned, "What a combo. We make a good team." I laughed. Loudly. Then sent back, "Next time, we're doing dumplings." Her response? A single word? Deal. December crept in like powdered sugar on a countertop. Light, sneaky, and impossible to sweep away completely. And with it came a flood of emails, DMs, and invites. Apparently, going mildly viral for feeding your mother-in-law on live TV makes you something of a seasonal darling. Every community newsletter wanted a quote. A cooking podcast wanted an interview. One YouTuber even asked if I'd be willing to film a holiday chaos kitchen collab where we swap family recipes and cook while blindfolded. I politely declined that last one. I wasn't in it for the spectacle. I was in it for the spark, that quiet connection over a shared bite. And maybe, just maybe, the satisfaction of proving that I'd always been more than just the woman stirring something too salty. One email, though, stood out. It was from a charity food drive event called Plates of Hope. They wanted me to run a live cooking demo at their holiday gala. Audience of about 200, black tie optional, big deal donors, and a focus on feeding local families during the winter. They saw the clip of me on Sunrise Today. They loved the energy, the message, the spice. And they wanted me. Not Mrs. So-and-so, not office potluck hero. Just me. I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. The night of the gala was a snow globe fantasy. Twinkling lights, long tables draped in white linen, bowls of pine cones no one was allowed to touch. Everyone was dressed like they'd just stepped out of a magazine, except me, in my trusty black jumpsuit and an apron that read, "Seasoned with sass." I was escorted to a demo table at the front of the room, where cameras would broadcast my cooking onto big screens for the audience. I wasn't nervous, not exactly, but there was a little knot in my stomach that felt suspiciously like adrenaline mixed with leftover cranberry chutney. Then I saw who was sitting at the front table, Marlene, and next to her, my husband. He gave a tiny wave. I raised my whisk like a sword. We were even. I kicked things off with a story. Just like always. Hi everyone, I'm here tonight because someone once told me I shouldn't cook anymore, that I just didn't get it. And I believed them, for a while, until I realized that maybe they just hadn't tasted the right bite. There were a few knowing chuckles from the crowd. I kept going. Tonight, I want to show you a dish that means warmth, resilience, and the kind of spice that lingers long after the plate's empty. Then I began. Coconut curry chickpea stew with roasted sweet potato and a hint of lime. The scent alone had people leaning forward. I talked while I stirred. Shared how food was never just food in my house. It was identity, memory, a quiet kind of love. I cracked 3 jokes, got 2 solid laughs, and 1 loud snort from someone in the back. Success. When it was done, I plated a single bowl and set it on the tasting table. The host invited 1 audience member to come try it live. Guess who volunteered? Marlene. I swear the woman had faster reflexes than a game show buzzer. She strutted up, took 1 sniff, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "If my son ever tells you to stop cooking again, call me. I'll disown him on the spot." The room erupted. Even my husband laughed, though it sounded slightly wounded. She took a bite, then another, then held up the spoon and declared, "Somebody give this woman a restaurant already." The event raised over $100,000 that night. But more than that, it raised me, lifted me out of a place I hadn't realized I was still trying to crawl free from. Because somewhere between the first onion I chopped and the applause that followed, I felt something inside me click into place. This wasn't just redemption. It was recognition. Later back at home, we sat on the couch, me, him, and the blanket that had become neutral ground in our quiet marital reset. He looked at me and said, "I didn't know you could do all this." I raised an eyebrow. "Cook?" "No," he said. "Shine." It wasn't romantic. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was honest. And I appreciated that more than flowers or flattery. I leaned into the cushion, exhaled slowly. "Well," I said, "now you do." And then we sat in comfortable silence, a new ingredient in our relationship. Not flashy, but nourishing. December rolled into January, and suddenly the quiet hum of celebration faded into the cold click of calendars turning. You know that feeling when the holiday lights come down and the house feels a little too big, a little too quiet? That's where I found myself, surrounded by empty pie tins and echoes of applause, wondering, what now? That's when I got the call. "Hey, this is Josie from Local Flavor," said a chipper voice I vaguely remembered from the gala. "We're curating a winter series featuring homegrown talent. Think, cooking meets storytelling. We want your kitchen and your voice." I blinked. "My kitchen," I repeated. "Your kitchen," she said. "Your story, your food. Intimate, warm, unscripted. Just you doing what you do." I said yes, then immediately panicked. Let me tell you something about filming in your own home. Nothing makes you more aware of how uneven your countertops are, or how loud your fridge hums, or how personal your spice drawer is until a stranger brings in likes and says, "Pretend we're not here." Yeah, okay. But the crew was sweet, kind, patient. They let me mess up my first take without judgment. They asked questions like, "What does this dish mean to you?" And "When did you first feel like your cooking mattered?" And somewhere between the sizzle of shallots and the scent of turmeric rising into the air, I stopped worrying how I looked and just cooked. I made my grandmother's sesame noodles with pickled cucumber and crushed peanuts, told stories about my mother hiding cookies behind the rice bags, laughed about the time I accidentally set off the smoke alarm trying to flambe a pear. It wasn't polished, but it was real, and the camera loved it. A week later, the episode dropped. The title was simple. She was told to stop cooking. She cooked anyway. It was 27 minutes of joy, mess, memory, and one great joke about how saffron costs more per gram than gold, which is why I treat it like glitter from heaven. People loved it. DMs poured in, not the viral kind this time. No memes, no shouty headlines, just messages from women who said things like, "I haven't cooked in years, but this made me want to try again. My ex used to criticize everything I made. I needed this. Thank you for reminding me that food is still mine." I cried. Not the dramatic movie kind, just quietly. At the kitchen table, tea in one hand, phone in the other, heart full. That's when I knew this wasn't just a season. It was a shift, a turning point. My kitchen wasn't just a place to prove something anymore. It was mine again, not a battleground, not a performance stage, a sanctuary. And surprisingly, my husband began to understand that too. He stopped hovering, stopped second-guessing, started asking, "How did you get the rice that fluffy? What does paprika actually do? Can I try stirring that?" I let him, not because I needed to, but because I could. Because growth isn't just about reclaiming space. It's about choosing who you share it with, intentionally. One night, he surprised me. "Want to go out Friday?" he asked. I tilted my head. "Date night?" He smiled. "Sort of. Cooking class. You teach. I learn. I already signed us up." I choked on my tea. "You voluntarily enrolled yourself in a cooking class taught by me?" He nodded. I figured it's time I started eating my words, and maybe your noodles too. Cheesy, but sweet. I said yes. That Friday, we walked into a small rec center kitchen filled with mismatched chairs, stained cutting boards, and strangers who smiled nervously as they tied aprons. It was my first class as a guest instructor, and his first class as the guy whose wife had gone viral for a family food feud. He didn't seem embarrassed. He seemed proud. During the class, I watched him fumble with a whisk, burn one pancake, and still laugh when his garlic hit the oil too hard and hissed like a villain in a cartoon. When class ended, a woman came up to me and said, "Thank you for doing this. My daughter hasn't cooked since her divorce. Tonight, she did." I nodded, because I knew what that felt like. Back at home, we stood in the kitchen, quiet, golden lit, safe. He looked around. "This place feels different," he said. "It's the same kitchen," I replied. He nodded. "Yeah, but you're different." And he was right, I was. Not because I'd changed, but because I'd returned. To the version of myself I'd buried under someone else's expectations. To the joy that had always been mine. To the scent of garlic, the hum of jazz, the warmth of knowing that what I create here, this magic in a saucepan, belongs to me. And no one can ban me from that again. Spring crept in wearing soft greens and citrus skies, and suddenly the air smelled like second chances. The kind of air that makes you want to open every window and bake something that takes way too long, just because you can. So that's what I did. Braised short ribs. Slow, aromatic, the kind of dish that tells time to chill. I wasn't cooking to prove anything anymore. I was cooking because it felt good. Because every sizzle, stir, and waft of garlic reminded me that I had taken something back, and that was worth celebrating. Even if no one else was watching. Except people were still watching. The local food magazine did a follow-up profile titling it, "From Potluck to Powerhouse, Her Kitchen Takeover Continues." Mel thought it was dramatic. I thought it was hilarious and flattering, and also mildly terrifying, because the article ended with, "She's cooking up something big. We can feel it." Which was news to me, until the email arrived. It was from a small indie publisher. They had seen my video, read the articles, watched the local flavor episode. They wanted to talk about a cookbook. Pause. Let that sink in. A real one, with glossy pages, cozy photos, maybe even one of those little linen bookmarks built into the spine. Me, the woman once banned from her own kitchen, being asked to write the thing that others would use in theirs? I reread the email 3 times, just to make sure it wasn't a prank. Then I texted Mel, book deal? She replied in all caps, too inappropriate for polite transcription, followed by 17 sparkles and a voice note that sounded like she just won the lottery. The first meeting was over Zoom. The editor, Rachel, had glasses too big for her face and an energy that made you want to hand over your life story and your banana bread recipe all at once. She said, "We don't want just recipes. We want you, the woman behind the garlic, the stories that simmer between the stirs. I smiled. Good, I said, because I've got plenty of both. Writing the cookbook became my new rhythm. Morning coffee, laptop open, jazz low, memories bubbling up like stock on a slow boil. Each recipe had a story. The dumplings my grandmother made by hand, her nails stained with turmeric. The resignation pasta I cooked the night I quit a job that drained me. The sweet potato soup I cried into when I first realized I wasn't being heard at home. And the comeback dish, the one that started it all, chili soy chicken over coconut jasmine rice. I named it the Ban Lifter. Because it was. My husband watched all of this unfold like someone seeing a new season of a show he thought was canceled. He asked fewer questions, offered more help. He even tested recipes with me, standing by the stove like a student, asking things like, is this supposed to smell nutty or burnt? And should I be sweating this much, or is that just garlic? We laughed. A lot. It was like we were both unlearning the old script, rewriting our own. Marlene naturally wanted to be involved. I make a killer bread pudding, she declared over lunch one day. You're welcome to contribute a guest recipe, I offered. She beamed. Make sure you spell my name right. Absolutely, I said. Marlene, with an asterisk. She narrowed her eyes. What's the asterisk for? Secret ingredients, I said. She nodded, satisfied. The book slowly took shape. Stirring Through Silence, Recipes from a Kitchen Reclaimed. That was the title. And every page felt like a love letter to the parts of myself I once tucked away under someone else's appetite. The day I submitted the final manuscript, I stood in the middle of my kitchen and just exhaled. The light was golden. The window was open. The smell of cardamom hung in the air like a sigh, and for once, I didn't feel the need to check if anyone approved. I just let it be. Mine. Later that night, over dinner, grilled eggplant, tahini drizzle, crispy chickpeas, my husband raised his glass. To your book, he said, and the fact that I now know the difference between cumin and coriander. We clinked glasses. Big growth. I smiled. And to your first signature dish, he added. The Ban Lifter? I said, surprised. No. He replied, pointing at his plate. This eggplant. I'm obsessed. I grinned. Another win. Not just for my cooking, but for everything it now represented. When the publisher sent the first print proofs, I held the sample copy in both hands like it was made of gold leaf and childhood dreams. The cover had a soft matte finish. A photo of me in my kitchen, mid-stir, smile crooked, apron smudged with something I couldn't even remember making. It looked lived in, warm, real. On the inside flap it read, "This book is for anyone who was told to be quiet. Stir louder." I closed it gently and cried for the full length of a kettle's boil. Not because I was sad, but because I wasn't. For the first time in ages, I felt completely aligned with the version of me I used to keep hidden. Stirring alone in the early morning, humming songs no one heard. Now, the world was listening. The book launched quietly. No stadium tour, no celebrity forward, just a weekend pop-up event at the neighborhood market and a local bookstore with a folding table, a banner, and enough folding chairs to seat maybe 20. 30 showed up, then 40. By the end of the afternoon, we were standing room only, and someone was literally sitting on a produce crate taking notes on their phone. A little girl came up to me, maybe 10 or 11, clutching her mom's hand. She whispered, "I like to cook too." I smiled. Then you're already magic. The reviews trickled in slowly at first. Blog posts, kitchen selfies, even a few TikToks with people flipping through the pages and holding up dishes they'd recreated. One video in particular made me pause. It was a quiet clip, no music, just a woman in her 40s, standing in her kitchen. She held up the book and simply said, "My ex used to make fun of my cooking. I stopped for years. This was my first real meal since I left. Thank you." She panned to the stovetop, ginger chicken bubbling away, and gave a small nod. I watched that video 4 times, then sent her a private message that just said, "I'm so proud of you." She replied with a heart emoji and a photo of her empty plate. At home, everything felt lighter. My husband had stopped trying to reclaim his former culinary authority and now referred to me jokingly as the head chef of redemption. I didn't correct him, because honestly, it had a nice ring to it. He helped prep meals now, not because he wanted praise, but because it gave us something to do together. He chopped, I seasoned. We danced awkwardly in the kitchen when no one was watching. Okay, when Mel was watching. She filmed us once and made a slow-mo montage to Ain't No Mountain High Enough. I posted it. It hit 20K views in 3 hours. Comments ranged from couple goals to this is what healing looks like in casserole form. I wasn't mad at that. Then came the invitation I didn't see coming. A national morning show. Not just local. Big league. They'd seen the cookbook, loved the story, wanted me for a guest segment and a live cooking demo. My stomach flipped, and for the first time it wasn't nerves, it was excitement. I said yes. Immediately started prepping a travel kitchen kit like it was a space mission. When I told Marlene, she laughed and said, "You better pack extra chutney." When I told my husband, he kissed my forehead and said, "Don't forget to take your apron. It's your cape now." I grinned, because honestly, it was. The morning of the flight, I stood at the airport gate, apron rolled neatly in my carry-on, and realized something incredible. This moment, this skyward leap, had come from a single ban, a simple, arrogant declaration that you shouldn't cook anymore. And yet here I was, headed toward a national stage, carrying recipes born from silence and reclaimed with spice, and it felt good. Better than good. It felt earned. I boarded the plane with earbuds in, jazz humming, the soft rumble of takeoff wrapping me in warmth. No panic, no imposter syndrome, just anticipation. I knew what was next, because the kitchen wasn't the only thing I'd reclaimed. I had found my voice again, and this time, I was serving it hot. The studio lights were brighter than I expected, hot and buzzing like bees above a spring picnic. My palms were damp, apron freshly ironed, and somewhere behind the camera, a producer was whispering, "We're live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And just like that, I was on national television, standing behind a marble countertop in a gleaming test kitchen, next to a host with perfect teeth and an even more perfect laugh. Today we're joined by the author of Stirring Through Silence, a woman who's turning everyday recipes into viral healing. Please welcome. They said my name. It rang out like a gong in a cathedral. I smiled, nodded, waved. "Hi," I said. I'm really happy to be here. And somehow, I meant it. We jumped right in, camera angles switching, producers signaling, pans sizzling just as planned. I was making the band lifter. Of course. The chili soy chicken, jasmine rice with coconut, scallion drizzle. A dish born from rejection, rebuilt in joy. The host leaned in as the aroma filled the air. She said, fanning her face with her cue cards. "This smells amazing. Tell us again how this dish got its name?" I grinned. "Well," I said, gently turning the chicken. "Once upon a time, my husband banned me from cooking at home. This was the first dish that changed his mind. His mother's too, actually, on live TV, no less." The audience laughed. A few clapped. "You're kidding!" I shook my head. "Not at all. In fact, she asked for the recipe before the cameras even stopped rolling." The host looked stunned. "I hope you wrote about that in the book." "Oh, I did," I said. Chapter 4, right next to the cranberry chutney recipe, with a note that says, "Thanks, Marlene." More laughter. Another swell of applause. Later, after the segment wrapped and I was off air, someone from the crew handed me a phone. "You've got a message," they said. "Someone called in, wanted to talk to you directly," I answered. "Hello?" It was my mother-in-law. "Sweetheart," she said, "that was phenomenal. I'm watching with my knitting group. They're already fighting over who gets my copy of the book." I laughed. "Tell them I'll sign extras." She paused. "Your grandmother would have been proud." That hit different. I didn't say anything for a second, just held the silence like a teacup. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. So by the time I got back home, everything had changed, and also stayed exactly the same. The kitchen still had its familiar hum. The wooden spoon still wobbled in the drawer. My husband had burned the rice trying to surprise me with dinner and ordered pizza as backup. But on the counter sat something new, a framed print of the book cover with a little sticky note attached. "From pot band to pot boss. So proud of you." It was signed, "Your #1 fan." I didn't ask who wrote it. I didn't need to, because that moment, standing in my kitchen with the smell of pizza and success mingling in the air, was the softest victory of all. Life didn't magically become perfect. There were still dishes to scrub, still days I didn't feel like cooking, still moments when doubt crept in like smoke under the door, but I had fire now. Controlled, intentional, all mine. I no longer stirred in silence. I stirred with purpose, with joy, with seasoning that didn't ask permission. And every so often, someone would stop me on the street, or DM me online, or send a letter that started with, "I used to be scared of the kitchen." And I would smile, every time, because I understood, and I knew what they were really saying. I used to be scared of being myself, and now they weren't. Because if I could do it, if I could rise from mockery to morning shows, from potluck whispers to published pages, then so could they. And if they couldn't quite believe it yet, well, I'd be right there, waiting with a warm bowl and a wooden spoon, whispering, "Start with garlic. The rest will follow." So now, as you turn out the lights, let me leave you with this. Imagine a quiet kitchen, the stove still warm, a single candle flickering next to a chipped ceramic bowl filled with the last of tonight's stew. Outside, the wind hums low. Inside, it's all soft shadows and steady breath, no pressure, no noise, just the gentle rhythm of home, of something made by hand, with love, with memory. We all have places that tried to mute us. Rooms where our voice felt small, tables where we weren't asked to sit, pans we were told we didn't know how to hold. But kitchens always leave the door cracked open. And sometimes if you're brave enough to pick up the spoon, to season boldly, to taste your own story without flinching, you'll find that what was once your silence becomes someone else's soundtrack. So wherever you are right now, curled up in bed, staring at the ceiling, fighting off the weight of a long week, just know there's a version of you, standing barefoot in the kitchen light, stirring something real. And it's enough. It's always been enough. So rest easy tonight, and maybe tomorrow you'll start with garlic too.